Perfect.
Okay, great, thanks. I'm way more comfortable this way. Well, thank you all for coming tonight. My name is Candace Ballmer, and I work with a not-for-profit, a private not-for-profit, a national not-for-profit organization that's funded by the federal government to assist small, poor rural communities with water and sewer projects. And a lot of it is technical assistance and guidance. And I've actually been working with Amenia for a number of years, trying to help them wrestle with this issue. And it's not uncommon for small communities to be wrestling with this issue. So what I thought that I would do, first of all, this is part one of a three-part series. And what I want to do tonight is lay some foundation for folks that may not have a too technical grasp of some of the issues, so that when you hear from the engineer and you hear some of the proposals that are being proposed, you'll understand some of the background of what your options are and how you came to get to where you are. So the second part is going to be a more technical presentation, and that's the wastewater committee will talk to you about how they came to make some of the decisions that they did, and the engineer, Clark Engineering, will talk to you about small community examples in other communities that are similar to what you're looking at for Amenia. And hopefully the Dutchess County Water and Wastewater Authority will be able to talk to you more about some of the funding specifics, because that's really, I know, what you're most concerned with is how can we make this affordable. And part three is actually, and this is all kind of setting you up so that when you hopefully will come on this field trip to see the treatment facility at Hillsdale, because that is the technology that has risen to the top is maybe the best for Amenia for what you're trying to do here. So today, again, is to lay some of the foundation of that. And I want to review some of the challenges that small communities like Amenia face with respect to assuring adequate and affordable wastewater treatment while still assuring that you have a vibrant downtown with the services that you want and that you need. I want to explain some of the basics of wastewater treatment to help community residents and leaders to understand and recognize some of these options and the choices that they're making. I'm going to describe very generally how the Hillsdale treatment system works, so again, lay the foundation for a more technical presentation next time. And I'm going to talk a little bit about your funding picture as it is right now and what some of the challenges are that you're looking at. What we figured is, I think the best way is probably to hold questions to the end, but if anybody has a burning question and you want to raise it that's directly related to the presentation, please don't hesitate to stop. But the other point I wanted to make is that you probably have very specific questions that will probably be answered to some extent, at least, in the next more technical presentation. So if you have a chance, I'm assuming we might take a brief break. I'm not sure, but either at the break or at the end or in the ensuing weeks. We're looking at the next presentation to be the first weeks, sometime in the first couple of weeks of April. But to make sure that your questions, you can write them down and send them to the wastewater committee, so we make sure that the folks are answering your very specific and important questions that aren't covered today. So, in communities like Amenia, you're typically, the easy communities have been done. Those more larger communities with dense populations where the consequences of failing septic systems are very obvious. There's dense populations that can bear the cost of the treatment system. Then you have these very small rural communities that are working okay with septic systems, but you're in that intermediate size where, like many communities of your size, you've wrestled with this issue for many, many years. And proposals have been voted down in the past. You're struggling to find a way to make it affordable, so you're not alone in that. But I recognize that there's some serious challenges that have a lot to do with your community size. More densely populated areas have more users per length of pay and more payers into the system. And quite honestly, the technical expertise that's available and the training for engineers and others really has focused systems. So that this idea of alternatives for small communities has been an emerging field that is growing, but it's not exactly in its infancy, but it doesn't have the history that more conventional large-scale central sewer systems has. Typical reasons for lack of community support in communities like yours and other communities is always, number one, is cost. It's like, well, how can we make this affordable? Some people really fear that if we have sewers, that's going to promote overdevelopment and rampant growth. Some folks say, well, we don't need a sewer system. Our septic systems are fine. Why do we even need this? Some people say, well, yeah, it's a good idea, but I don't think it's really meeting the needs of the whole community. And other folks just say, well, you know, it sounds good, but tell us more. We want to be convinced because we're not certain this really is something that we need or can afford. And typical questions that arise are, well, can septic systems meet the needs of our community? Why or why not? Does the community want to encourage downtown growth and expansion? And is that part of your master plan? What is your vision for your community? Is there strong support for a central system in the community? And I know the wastewater committee has worked so hard to craft a service area that serves the people who want it the most and need it the most, that downtown core area. How much can the community afford to pay per household? And that is, quite honestly, the crux of the matter, as I'm sure you get. And how can the community save costs? How can we make this plan more affordable? Is there something we can do to make it more affordable for us? Is there something in planning or design, operation and maintenance, replacement? How can we make this more affordable? For example, should we be serving a smaller or larger area? Maybe more people, more payers, smaller areas, smaller system. Is there some planning tasks that we can go through to help us bring those costs down? Finding a system that's comparatively less to construct and build. That's your design and construction phase. Well, what about a system that's less expensive to operate and maintain? And that's your operation and maintenance. And finally, how about a system that's less expensive to add on to and to replace down the road? These systems don't last forever, and it's something you want to be thinking about 20 or 30 years down the road, that you're going to be looking at expanding or replacing or upgrading or at the very least repairing the system. So how affordable is that component going to be? So I wanted to start out with some of the wastewater treatment basics to help folks who may not have a strong idea, or they have some idea, but they could use some more information. And I think that this is a really important part. So we'll talk about why wastewater treatment is important, what's wastewater, and how do we treat it, and what options do small communities have in terms of how a system is configured, how is it designed so that you can get the best system for your community. Well, why is wastewater treatment important? Because we're protecting the waters that we care about. We're protecting our water-based economies. We're protecting the rivers and streams that we love so much, our recreational resources, and of course our drinking water supplies. Septic systems are your typical first line of defense. A standard septic system, for those of you who might not be too familiar with what's underground, and if you're anything like me, your septic system might not look like a traditional septic system. It might be a little simpler, but you've got a collection system in the house, and the pipe pipes it down to a septic tank underground where the solids or the sludge settles out, and this settled wastewater comes out to the distribution box, which just makes sure that each of these pipes gets an equal amount of water. And these pipes are laid in soil that is where the treatment, most of the treatment is happening. So what's the problem? Well, one problem with septic systems is they need to be maintained. And as you can imagine, when things are underground, it's harder to see something that breaks. And if you're not seeing something visual, like, for example, surfacing of wastewater underground, you may not even realize that you have a problem. Maybe a valve is broken off in your tank, maybe your distribution box is crooked and it's only sending the wastewater to one line. There's any number of things that that could cause your system to be functioning substandard. Or you may just have like not much of a system and a straight pipe out to the stream. This is some green dye. You've probably heard about dye testing. You flush it down the toilet and you look for where it comes out. And this is something you don't want to see. You definitely don't want to see. I don't have a picture where it was actually coming out in the neighbor's sink. Not good. Some other causes of failure or substandard septic system operation, or maybe the person who was looking at that site when they were first planning your system didn't evaluate it well enough. Maybe they didn't look at the soils, or they saw the neighbor had some good soils, and they figured your site had some good soils too, and maybe it didn't have as good soils. Or maybe they didn't pick the right system for those conditions. Or maybe the installer didn't exactly follow the directions. That certainly happened. Sometimes you end up using your system more than you thought. It was an older, maybe it was an older camp or an older household, or a newer family moved in with children and you've got a lot more water use. Maybe you added a bedroom. The system, yes?
How many homes in the current district have failing septic systems?
I can't answer that. Write that down. I know a number of systems that were failing have been addressed. So I know a long time ago when we did our first income survey and we went through the middle of town in the summer, it was quite obvious that there were a number of systems you could snub on. And I know quite a few of them have been repaired. But I'll let the committee address that. You also may have inappropriate use. Maybe you're flushing the wrong things down the toilet, quite honestly. And that can stress and even damage your system to the point where it has a catastrophic failure. And a good example, I think of always, is latex paint. You shouldn't be putting large amounts of latex paint down there or much. Okay. I don't let any latex paint go down my system because it really will clog up that drain. So some problems that you'll see visually, you see wastewater on the surface of the ground, and it's pretty obvious. You can see it, you can smell it. When it rains, it washes all that untreated or partially treated wastewater into your streams and your rivers, the ocean, so it gets carried away beyond the site that there's actually a failure. You can also have failure underneath the surface of the ground. Maybe your septic system isn't working very well. Untreated waste is going down into the groundwater where it moves towards your surface waters as well. So you can have failures that you don't even know about, that you can't even see. Some of the problems are pathogens. What are pathogens? Well, they're organisms that cause disease. And the ever popular E. coli here, the bacteria that everyone's pretty familiar with. Another, we've got a couple of protozoans here. Giardia lamblia causes giardiasis, and Cryptosporidium is another problem protozoan. Don't really have much typhoid, but Salmonella is another bacteria. And then, of course, the viruses that cause a whole variety of gastroenteric problems that result in diarrhea and vomiting. But these are all organisms that can be transmitted in untreated or poorly treated wastewater. So we have a potential health threat. Another problem with improperly or poorly treated wastewater is that you have a concentration of nutrients. And we're talking about phosphorus and nitrogen. Well, what do we use phosphorus and nitrogen for? Fertilizer. Thank you. So the same thing happens when these nutrients get into your surface waters. They cause the vegetation in the water to explode, and you can get a lot of overgrowth. For example, you can see the goo here. Here's this algae on the surface, or it can just be totally suspended in the water so that the water just looks entirely green or brown. But that process is called nitrification. And it causes problems because it lowers the oxygen levels in the water and it degrades water quality. Not to mention it's unsightly. Some other things to think about when you're thinking about a septic system is separation distances. Regulations are set up to provide prescriptive distances that you need to meet to be horizontally and vertically. So for example, your well needs to be at least 50 feet from your tank, and it needs to be at least 100 feet from your absorption system, for example. can't be near your well, or your system can't be near their well. And there's also vertical separation distances, so that, for example, if you've got what we call a limiting layer underneath the soil of underneath your system, it might be bedrock, or you might have a very high groundwater, or you might have seasonally high groundwater, or you've got some difficult layer like a clay layer. You need at least 2 feet separation distance from your treatment area to account for that, to accommodate that. So the separation distances that your system should be meeting. Again, there's the vertical distance or horizontal distances that you need to meet the well from the system. And notice here, here's the house, here's a well, here's the treatment, here's the leach field. But notice that 50% expansion area. You're supposed to have room for when your leaching system gets tired out, that you can move into an adjacent area to continue the treatment. So that's important to think about as well. So these separation distances are often the challenge for small communities like yours, because many times the communities were built without attention to that, and that some of the houses are on small lots. They can't meet the separation distances. They may have poor soils, so traditional septic system is difficult to use, and they may have non-traditional systems that maybe aren't up to snuff in terms of operation. And just to point out this issue of separation distances, here's this lot, and the proposed house is here, and the well's already in the ground. You put the well in the ground, and happens a lot. You can buy a house and put the well where you want. Here's the neighbor's well, here's the other neighbor's well. So where does the system go? Well, now we need 100 feet separation from that system. So you draw a circle of 100 feet around each of those wells. It doesn't give you as much space on that site as you thought you would have to put your septic system. So that's a consideration. And of course, there's regulations that govern these systems, whether it's a septic system or a municipal treatment plant. There's design standards. There's drinking water quality standards that your drinking water sources have to meet. There's wastewater discharge quality standards that if you have a municipal treatment plant and you're discharging, say, to a surface water, you have quality standards that you have to meet. And there's stream water quality standards depending on the stream you're discharging to. It may have even more stringent requirements, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Just briefly, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about who regulates, because sometimes it can be a little confusing. And essentially, the Department of Health is dealing with issues of protecting drinking water sources and public health. So that's their sphere of influence. Whereas the DEC is looking at protecting waters for other uses, like our food sources, for public recreation, for commercial uses, and even for industrial resources. So the DEC is that regulatory agency. And when we talk about wastewater regulations, well, gee, I heard that the Department of Health regulates my septic systems. That's true. So under 1,000 gallons a day, sorry, I can take under 1,000 gallons a day, that comes under the purview of the Department of Health. Larger systems, like municipal systems, larger businesses, institutions, industry, over 10,000 gallons a day, that's regulated by the DEC. Between 1,000 and 10,000, there's actually a memorandum of understanding between those two agencies, such that if the Department of Health is already in there, like let's say it's a food, they're in there inspecting a restaurant that has an on-site system that's over 1,000 gallons a day, less than 10,000, they say, hey, we're in there anyway, so we'll be responsible for overseeing that system. So that may help to clarify some of the confusion about who is regulating these systems. So what are your options? As an individual property owner, suppose you have a substandard system or you know of substandard systems in your community, what can you do? Well, the very first thing you want to do is have a professional inspect your system. And that will involve opening up your tank, very often digging up your D-box, distribution box, maybe probing that leach on a management district, an authority, somebody with authority to tax and fine that would oversee the management of these enhanced treatment units. However, if you have an existing system, you have a lot of flexibility in what you're allowed to do. So you're saying, well, why can't Amenia just have septic systems and throw in enhanced treatment units and away we go? Well, that's an interesting point, except that, I jumped ahead of myself. I was just going to show you an example of what some of these enhanced treatment units look like. Sometimes they're like a treatment plant in a box, which is what this aerobic unit here, the singular aerobic unit is. It's a treatment plant in a box. Other examples are technologies that are media-based. And for example, you might have a peat system, which produces a very high-quality effluent. Here's a combination of peat and a man-made textile all rolled together, and the wastewater is being distributed over that treatment unit. Foam cubes is one system that we've seen out there. There's any number of media that you could use in these boxes to produce a higher quality effluent. And in fact, I remember one of the systems we saw out in Rhode Island, it was leftover sneaker chips from the Nike plant they were looking at using as a media. And finally, as an example of another media filter, in fact, this is a residential installation of the Orenco Advantech system, which is a system that's being used by the municipality of Hillsdale. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. But you can see this is actually on Skaneateles Lake, which is Syracuse's water supply. And you can see that system is darn close. And there is not much room at all to be working with there. And the textile sheets are in this box, and this thing that the guy is lifting up is just the distributors. That's the wastewater comes out of that onto the media in the box. But we'll talk about more of that in a minute. But it comes back to what's your vision for your community. If you're really looking to expand that downtown area to get large water-using businesses in there, to have the kinds of services that it's very difficult to sustain, even if you were to put in an enhanced unit, which is what certainly Amenia has been talking about for many years, is improving and expanding and being able to create a more vibrant downtown. So that brings you to the idea of a municipal system, and that's where I wanted to talk today about what is involved in wastewater treatment, so you can see where some of these decisions that have been made, why they were made. So very basically, wastewater treatment, it doesn't matter whether it happens in a tank or a municipal plant or a commercial system, you're doing the same processes. You're collecting the wastewater, you're separating out the solids from the water portion, you're treating those two waste streams, you're dispersing the treated wastewater, and you're disposing of your treated sludge. So again, collection and transmission. We're collecting wastewater from the source, transmitting it to the location. Separation and treatment. We're separating the liquid from the solids, and we're biologically treating the wastewater and the solids separately. And we call, you're probably familiar with some of these terms, the separating by settling, that's called primary treatment. In many countries, that's all they do. They separate the solids from the liquid, and the liquid goes into the ocean, which is why they're in islands. You always want to know what kind of wastewater treatment they have before you go swimming. The biological treatment process is called secondary treatment, and that's the bulk of your wastewater treatment. That's where the real treatment's taking place. And then you have this even further treatment, a polishing step, where you might be, for example, dealing with unruly nutrients, and phosphorus comes to mind, particularly in the case of Amenia. Dispersal, again, you're dispersing the treated liquid. You may be doing that to a stream, or you may be doing it subsurface. We'll talk a little bit about that. And you're disposing of those treated solids. So your household collection system is where it all starts for you. So when you're looking in your household collection system, here's some copper pipes, and here's a bigger cast iron pipe. Which one's the sewer pipe? The big white one, right. So some people say, well, which one is it? Well, this is drinking water, much smaller piping. Those large pipes are your but still the same concept. You're collecting wastewater from the house the same way that you're sending it into a municipal sewer. And there's two basic choices of sewer. One that handles solid matter and one that doesn't. And it makes a difference. It makes a difference to you. So let's talk about that. Some examples of some solids handling sewers are typical, conventional, what we think of as gravity sewer. You may also have heard of things like grinder pumps and vacuum systems. These effluent systems, these effluent sewers aren't dealing with the solids. They're not solids handling sewers. And how do you get the wastewater to the pipe? Well, maybe you get it there by gravity, and they call that septic tank effluent gravity, or STED. Or maybe you have to pump it up to the line, septic tank effluent by pumping. So let's take a little closer look at that. So here with your gravity sewer, you've got the resident, and you're coming down your lateral to the main, your main sewer. So you've got a pitch, you've got to have a pitch in any kind of gravity sewer that's handling solids, because you don't want the solids to stop in the pipe. You got to tip it enough so that they flow. So it ends up, once you come out, here you are with your sewer that's running along the road, and here we are transmitting it to the treatment plant. Really, this line should be at an angle, because it's tipped. And you can end up going very deep. And after a while, you have to pump it back up. You can only go so far. So you can have pump stations that have issues that need to be maintained. Sometimes you can have water infiltrating, or if they're not kept well maintained, you can have water leaking into your system, so you're actually having non-wastewater having to be treated in your plant, and you don't want that. And that's called infiltration. Some other options for solids handling sewers, you may have heard of grinder pumps. And what happens in this system is you've got a grinder pump here that's grinding up your solids. And you're sending that ground mass down to this pressure collection sewer. And you have some flexibility because this, again, is a smaller pipe. You can use a smaller size transmission main here that can follow the ground contours. And another system, kind of similar solids handling sewer that can use a smaller diameter collection pipe is a vacuum sewer. And you've got some with a holding tank here, and it's connected to this vacuum main. And there's a large vacuum station that maintains vacuum throughout the system. And that, again, gives you the flexibility to use these smaller pipes. Effluent sewers are kind of neat because the settling, instead of going to, the solids go all the way to the plant, and then you've got to settle the solids out once it gets there, you're actually keeping your septic tank. You might have a new septic tank, but you're still settling your solids in your traditional septic tank. And then you're getting, again, here's your gravity feeding down to your gravity sewer main. And again, you've got a small diameter collection pipe that can follow the contours of the plant and gives you more flexibility. It might be cheaper, we'll talk about that in a second. Or you might have a pump that pumps that settled wastewater to that small diameter collection system. So again, that's what the step and stay is, gravity or pump. And very often you might have a combination of the two, depending on where the households are situated relative to your sewer line. So some of the features of a small diameter collection pipe is because they're not always, they don't always rely on gravity, they can be buried at more shallow depths, which of course saves you the cost of excavation. In some areas, particularly to rocky areas, that's a huge consideration and a huge cost. They can follow the contours of the land, and they may be less expensive. They should be less expensive and easier to install. And there's been a lot of progress in terms of technology for doing directional drilling, so you don't have the same excavation costs. You can install these pipes without huge excavation. They can be we're less likely to have water invade the system, like inflow and or infiltration rather, and they can be more easily routed around obstacles, which gives you more flexibility. And also it gives you flexibility for adding on and what they call just-in-time construction. So you're not building a huge system in anticipation of growth that may take 10 or 15 or 20 20 years down the road to happen, so you're not overbuilding your system right away. So again, a conventional sewer system, a gravity sewer system, is appropriate for densely developed areas. And this wastewater is traveling by gravity through a system of sewers and pumping stations. And it may be more difficult and more expensive to install. They usually are. And of course, they require manholes and pumping stations. And as I mentioned, you may have an opportunity for leakage into that system. Where the small diameter collection system, again, you're collecting your solids in your septic tank. You're sending that out to your small diameter line, either by gravity or by pumping. So, separation when you're settling, real simple. Whether you're in your septic tank or you're in a clarifier at a municipal treatment plant, the solids settle, you want to make the flow go really slow, and the solids settle out, the fats and the greases flow in this clear water in the middle. That's your wastewater that's proceeding on to this biological treatment phase, this clarified liquid wastewater. So in a septic tank, you've got wastewater coming in the inlet, and it hits this baffle. And the purpose of that baffle, and you should have a baffle in your tank, a two-compartment septic tank works the best. And you have a baffle, and the reason why is the reason why?
Skim on socks, coating stuff in the water coming in.
Actually, because it's a vertical baffle, what it's doing is it's slowing down the flow right away. And it's forcing you to start the settling process. When the slower flow, the solids drop out more rapidly. So as you move into under the baffle, the scum and the greases and fats start to flow to the top. And typically you might have an opening, a smaller opening, to prevent the solids from floating up into the second compartment and to keep the scum and the greases from getting sucked in here. So you want to be able to get as clear as possible liquid wastewater in here where more settling will still happen. There will be more grease floating. And you have another bathroom to keep that stuff out. In fact, you get a little degradation of those solids in the septic tank. And what happens is you get bubbles that surround, it's a product of the respiration of the organisms, and you get bubbles around your solids, and they start to float up. And they can float right out into your leach field and clog it up. So a baffle on the outlet helps to trap those solids, and many folks in the industry really recommend that you have some kind of what they call an effluent filter there, a filter to further trap those solids and keep them out of your leach field because they will cause trouble. And septic tanks, as you know, they're made of a variety. Concrete's very common. Plastic tanks are frequently used, especially difficult sites where you need to move them in. And of course, the homemade tanks. We're still looking for a picture of that 55 Chevy that people say is buried out in the farmer's land. But whether it's happening in a tank or a municipal treatment plant, same thing. You might have a circular clarifier, and you've got some kind of a thing that goes across the top that scrapes your grease. Or it might be a square tank like this, it scrapes the grease off, and the solids are being collected at the bottom for further treatment elsewhere. So we move into the secondary phase of treatment, which is a biological process where the microorganisms break down the wastewater as food. And when you think about this clear wastewater, you're saying, well, the solids aren't in there. What's the problem? Well, there's still a lot of dissolved material, and you'll see it is a color. You can see the wastewater itself is colored. And those are from dissolved solids. Well, gee, how do you get that out of there? You can't sell it. The microorganisms use that as food. And as they respire, as they use this as food, that they translate it into solid material. It comes out as bug bodies. Those organisms die and they become solids, which you can further collect. So you have solids collection even after the secondary treatment phase in a treatment plant. So the successful wastewater treatment, it's about providing a great home for your organisms. That's what all this is all about, is a good home for the organisms to thrive. So you're going to provide them the location, you're going to provide them the food, the wastewater, and you're going to ensure that they don't have extremes in temperature or pH or time. toxic things that you don't want in your wastewater that could kill those organisms, which is why you don't want to be pouring poison down your septic tank or into the system, and why that can really be a struggle for some municipal plants, is that pre-treatment or making sure that industrial waste or commercial waste has those toxins or other high-strength waste treated before it comes to the plant. But whether it's large-scale plants, an intermediate-sized community system, a small community innovation like Hillsdale, or an individual septic system, it's the microorganisms that are providing the bulk of the treatment, and that's the big thing that you always want to keep in mind. So where do the organisms live in a typical septic system?
Okay.
There's some that live in the tank, and there's some that live in the field. And the ones that live in the tank are what we call anaerobic organisms. They can thrive without free oxygen, and there isn't much free oxygen in that septic tank. And the problem with those guys is they don't grow very quickly. They take a long time to treat wastewater. Whereas these other organisms, aerobic organisms, organisms that like free oxygen, work much more quickly and effectively and efficiently to break down the wastewater. And they live out in the soil in your field. You may have, in a municipal plant, your organisms may be suspended in a tank. Actually, this is a picture of an ETU for a residential system, the same concept. When you're in a big wastewater plant, you've got a big tank, and you're aerating that liquid to give the organisms as much oxygen as they need to devour your wastewater. They might be suspended in something like a lagoon. Here's an oxidation ditch. This is in Woodstock, actually, and this is where the organisms are doing their breaking down. And these, I'll show you a better picture here, this brush aerator, this is an aerator. These two brushes keep stirring up that wastewater, keep putting that oxygen into that tank. The problem with brush aerators or other aerators is they can get expensive from an energy perspective. It costs money to run them. So your electricity cost when you're aerating a tank can be substantial. And as you know, with energy costs rising, it's more important now than ever. Here's an example. This is in Saugerties Village, and these are rotating biological contactors. This is another kind of home for microorganisms. Instead of being suspended in a tank, they're actually fixed onto a media, and we call that fixed growth or attached growth. And inside those tanks are actually these discs. And this is, again, this is an adaptation of that for a small residential system, or a small commercial system probably. But these discs are the organisms grown outside of the disc, and they rotate into the water where they get the food, and then they come out where they get the air, and into the water where they get the food, and out where they get the air. So you're getting that aeration, and you're getting this place for the microorganisms to grow. And they're housed in these large quantum, exactly. Another common treatment system that used to be very popular in the old days is a trickling filter. And again, this is attached growth. The microorganisms are living on this media, which is like a gravel type media. And mostly they used to be outside, and you've got an arm that just goes in a circle and spews wastewater onto the media, which is attached to these, or on the organisms, which is attached to this gravel-like media. This is actually the Catskill wastewater treatment plant, and this particular treatment filter is inside the filter. So it works more efficiently during those winter months, as you can imagine. Sand filters are a common small community option, and in this case, same thing. The media here is the sand, and the organisms are attaching to the sand particles, and that's where they are doing the treatment. As I mentioned, these textile sheets are another opportunity for a media that organisms can attach themselves to. And this is what the Hillsdale treatment system is using, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But just so you get the idea that we're finding a home, we're providing a place for these organisms to live that we can control and that we can ensure that they have the conditions for wastewater treatment. So again, the dispersal and disposal, we're dispersing the treated liquid wastewater, which may go to be discharged to a stream or some other surface water by the ocean side, like the ocean. Or you could discharge that treated wastewater underground, and we call that subsurface treatment. And there's, I get ahead of myself. And then this disposal, about treating your solid material in a separate manner and disposing of that. I talked about stream classifications. When you're wanting to discharge to a surface water, it's good to know how regulators look at streams. And they talk about headwater streams, where the streams originate up in the mountains. Year-round streams, which are perennial streams. And then we have seasonal streams, which are intermittent. They're not running all the time. And when you're discharging to an intermittent stream, you have to have a lot cleaner wastewater. You're not allowed to discharge the same quality as you would to a year-round stream. And that's a real important concept. In fact, in the town of Amenia wastewater collection and treatment feasibility study that Clark Engineering did, they made these points about those intermittent stream discharge limits, and that it's the most stringent level of treatment required by DEC. And that your effluent's got to be as clean or cleaner than that receiving stream. In fact, the discharge is actually anticipated to improve the quality of that stream. And then we come to subsurface disposal. And there are some advantages to subsurface disposal. And one is that there's fewer treatment components. There's a lower capital cost for constructing this kind of disposal. You have a more simple operational process. You have lower operation maintenance costs, and your reporting requirements are much more simple than with a surface discharge. And the biggest disadvantage is you need quite a bit of land because you're putting it into the soil. You need enough soil that can receive this treated wastewater. Finally, just briefly before we get to Hillsdale, to sludge treatment and disposal, there's a number of ways that you could be treating your sludge, but at the end of the day, you're taking the water out of it. Sludge sounds kind of like solids. It sounds like it's solid. Well, it's really mostly water. So the first thing you need to do is de-water that, is to dry that solid, to get as much water out of it as possible. So no matter what you're doing with it, if you're transporting it or using it, that you aren't paying to transport or use this water. You may have heard of digesters or seen them, large buildings where these sludge is digested by anaerobic organisms. In fact, one of the byproducts of this anaerobic digestion is methane. And many plants that do anaerobic digestion will capture that methane and use it in the facility for energy, capturing energy. And you may compost. A lot of times if you let the sludge sit in a pile, it's often like if you go to your landfill and you see there's piles of wood chips, for example, that you may have heard spontaneously combust. Well, there's a lot of heat going on. There's organisms in there that are breaking down this material and generating a lot of heat. That's happening when you compost sludge as well. And that heat helps to treat that sludge. And ultimate disposal, it may go to a landfill. It could go to the ocean disposal, because unfortunately pretty common. It may be land applied as fertilizer or some kind of other soil conditioner. In some places it's reused. I know Saugerties tried to reuse it and they developed a compost material, but they have a hard time getting a user for it. They ended up accumulating a lot of it. They ended up abandoning that system. But many places, especially in the middle of New York, use it quite successfully. Some places allow you to spray and irrigate that sludge. And sometimes it's actually burned. So, which brings us to the Hillsdale wastewater system. And this is the plant. This is the Hillsdale wastewater treatment plant. The tops of the pods are open for us to view because we're on a tour. But ordinarily, they're all shut. Their collection system utilizes individual septic tanks at the house, a small diameter collection system, and this septic tank at pump system. I think some are gravity as well. Oh, it's all pumped? Okay. Some of and the town manages that septic tank effluent. And one of the interesting things one of the operators told me, the guy in fact who runs the Catskill plant, also oversees or did oversee the Hillsdale plant, he said, you know, it was so great that we can control what goes into the plant. We don't have an overage of grease. They have a lot of problems with grease, fats and oils and greases, because there's a lot of fast food restaurants, just a lot of restaurants, and they may have an undersized grease trap, and maybe the regulations regarding grease capture weren't being as well enforced as they could there, and they were having some troubles with the Catskill plant. And he said, it's so great at Hillsdale because we can go look at these restaurants' tanks and see the problems, see when it needs pumping, to do the pumping before it becomes a problem. It's not coming down to the treatment plant. We're pumping these solids out and dealing with it elsewhere. And that was a wonderful operational benefit for them. The media system is this Advantex media filter. So we've got this plastic box, and in it, right here, we've got these, this is where it's discharging the water on top of these sheets. So what does that really look like? They're kind of like, if you imagine a drying rack, and you've got a bunch of towels hung in a row. They're just sheets hanging over this rack. And you can see they pull out quite easily. And this medium is where the organisms live. But what's so cool about that? Well, the cool part about it is organisms live in the space between the cracks. They need air to circulate, and they need a place to live. And there's so much pore space in these sheets. That's what makes it so neat. These white spots are pores in this textile medium. This is a grain of sand. This is a grain of gravel. There's no way if you had sand or gravel in that same amount of space that you'd get as much pore space as you can get in these textile sheets. So what does that mean? You have a much higher concentration of organisms doing the work of wastewater treatment in a smaller space. Here's an example of that residential installation we saw over at the Syracuse Skinny-Atlas Lake. And of course, you can see this tank is quite robust. You can stand on it, and here is the single open tank. The Hillsdale system has a series of 8 tanks. They're much larger than you have. They have 8 commercial pods in a row. And let's see if we can get a picture of the wastewater being spread out over these sheets. And in fact, sometimes when you're doing maintenance, you know, they might just pick up the sheets and hose them back down into the tank. It's a very flexible technology. Here's the plant operator taking some tests. We've got a sludge judge here where the operator is looking to see how much sludge is accumulating is an indication of how well the system is working. It doesn't accumulate much sludge. I don't have a picture that shows at the bottom of the sludge judge. It's about this much. It's not a lot of sludge accumulation because you've taken your solids out already before you even came here, right? You've taken them out of the septic tank. And there he is just putting the lids back on the tank with a screw gun. And finally, that all-important subsurface disposal in these absorption mounds. And it's hard to get a good picture of an absorption mound because it doesn't look like anything but this, which is a little hill with a manhole on top of it. But there's a series of absorption mounds there where the wastewater is dispersed. So, back to Amenia and paying for that municipal wastewater treatment system, that all-important issue of affordability, of getting the lowest cost design that's still going to do the job that you want it to do, to have the lowest operating costs that you can get away with, and to find funding, find low-interest loans, and ideally some grant money as well. So how does that work? Well, these funding agencies use what they call a target service charge. And the way they do it is they want to be able to compare different communities and how much can you afford. And they typically use this median household income. Well, what's a median household income? That's like, for the median household income in this room, if each of us put our income in a list and we put it from highest to lowest and pick the one in the middle, that's the median. So the top 10 people could be making billions, but the median would still be the one in the middle. So it's not an average, it's the median. And this target service charge, and this is nationwide affordability, and this is debated around the country and around the world. What do we consider affordable? And it used to be somewhere in the neck of woods of about 1 to 1.5% of that median household income. And not surprisingly, over time, it's jumped to be closer to 1.5 to 2% of that median household income. And quite honestly, across the country, it's not uncommon to find 2.5 to 3 times, or 3% of that median household income as what a single household unit could afford. So, what is the median household income for a median? The 2012 census has it at $50,083. So what does that mean for you? Well, you've been investigating, on the wastewater committee and the Dutchess County Water and Wastewater Authority has been investigating funding options on your behalf for quite some time. And last year, the most recent year, you've gone through a number of designs. You've managed to bring your costs down. You have a great idea for a treatment plant, and you're still trying to find funding. And this agency has said to you, well, for this estimated project cost of about $4.4 million, we estimate that your target service charge is going to be about $1,000. Now, it's important to remember when you have an estimated project cost, everybody, if they're smart, when they're putting together the budget, they build in some contingency, right? So all else being equal, if there's no surprises, and so much of that surprises is what kind of research you've done in the beginning, how much work your engineer has done to know where the rock is. That's a big one that always trips people up, that the engineers haven't done boring, say, in my neck of the woods, where if there's so much rock, that could be a deal breaker. But so the engineer really knows what's under the ground, and they know what your community characteristics are, what that geology is like, what that geography is like for the system that they're planning, so that there aren't any surprises. So we're hoping that this number is in fact going to be lower than $1,000. But you can't bet that there's not going to be problems, so you need to be looking at a realistic number. And the way that the agency came up with that is they said, we were concerned that if you came up with a higher cost than that your people couldn't afford that, more than $1,000. So we'll give you a low-interest loan. In fact, it's a zero-interest loan for 30 years. That's like a grant. That's like having a grant. You don't have to pay interest for 30 years. You know that in your house or your car, you're not paying interest. It's like a 50% grant over 30 years. We'll give you $3 million in zero-interest loans. But you still have a gap there, a funding gap of $1.4 million. And where is that going to come from? Yes?
So this is for approximately 130 units or homes or residences. This
approximately that, with a design flow of about 25,000 gallons per day.
Silo Ridge is putting in a system there that serves about 250 units for about half of the cost, for about $2.25 million.
One thing that's important to remember, and I don't know the details, I don't know the specifics, but I know that when you're a private entity, you're not held to the same requirements of bidding that a municipality is. So when you have to pay prevailing wage, that will drive up the cost, and there's no way a municipality cannot pay prevailing wage. I don't know if that's the issue there, though.
So just because we're a municipality, we have to pay twice the amount for half of the infrastructure?
Yeah, it's annoying, isn't it? But it protects the workers. It's important to realize that you're protecting the workers. Those prevailing wage rates exist for a reason. But I hear what you're saying, and I'm actually going to, I chatted a little about that beforehand, and it's so important that the committee can all hear this, and that we can talk about this either in a minute in more detail, and surely at the next meeting when we get into the specifics of Amenia's plans. But that's a very important one that you're making. Oh, what time are you at? Wow, good. That's what I was hoping, that this would be about an hour, because that is what I was trying to bring to you today was an overview that you can understand some of the decisions made and what some of your options might be moving forward.
Are you familiar with anaerobic digestion and the use of biogas?
Well, once again, normally anaerobic treatment is used for sludge. There's certainly some been research, and there may even be at this point facilities. I was actually in grad school, part of a research project looking at anaerobic digestion of the liquid portion, secondary effluent that we were talking about. But I can't speak to that with any kind of authority.
I'm surprised because it's actually the technology of the future. And
that may be true, but also it's good to remember that anaerobes do work much more slowly, and they can be very finicky about their
absolutely
environment.
There's actually a case study in Gloversville, New York, where the municipality was able to turn their waste into an annual revenue of almost $500,000 a year.
Do you remember if that was a sludge digester or secondary treatment? Because I hear this a lot, and it's like, well, no, that's just sludge, actually.
No, it's an anaerobic biogas capture system.
That's
and
treated
it
as
also
sludge.
has the additional benefits of not releasing the gas, which methane is one of the strongest greenhouse gases. So you capture that gas and you use it basically to power a generator that you can feed the utility grid and
Absolutely.
generate
And
electricity.
anaerobic digesters have been around forever. But they are, again, don't forget, it's sludge treatment, not so much that liquid wastewater treatment that we were talking about. And
Actually is
you're welcome
wastewater.
to hop in here anytime. If there's anything you have to add.
Can you speak louder, please? The Gloversville plant is quite a different flow from the flow.
This is Aaron Moore of Clark.
I would love to talk to you about the Gloversville plant and the flows we're talking here are very, very different. So that's a very interesting discussion, but I'm not sure for Candace's purpose and the discussion as far as her introduction to wastewater. That's what I would call this is wastewater 101. I think you might be at 301 or 501 to be discussing that. But certainly the
We're talking about costs here, and like I said, the wastewater treatment of tomorrow is where you capture that energy and you turn it into revenue. Right now, the New York State, where NYSERDA actually has $20 million available for research and development and to help communities or municipalities institute this type of system. So rather than borrowing $4 million at a low interest rate, or even if it's 0%, we could be given enough money to cover these project costs for free, and then also have the benefit of producing revenue every year thereafter. And you're right, it is, Gloversville is considerably larger. We wouldn't see that kind of, those kinds of revenues, but something is better than...
There is an economy of scale when you talk about
Right.
producing methane using that kind of waste energy type technologies.
Aaron, how many tons does Gloversville produce versus Amenia?
If I could pull that off, I would be so impressed with myself
Okay,
right now. I just happen to know that
Ballpark.
that's a multi-million gallon per day facility. That's the best I
And
can.
ours is?
25,000 thereabouts. Okay, so when you've got a lot of wastewater, you can do a lot with it. And there is absolutely, when you talk about anaerobic digestion, a good amount of methane that was produced. One of the, I don't know, one of my first places I worked, even as a college student, was out on Deer Island, which has these fabulous, gigantic eggs. When you fly into Boston Harbor, you can see they are gigantic, multi-story, tall sludge digesters. And they actually, that's a huge plant treating all of Boston's waste. They were on the forefront of turning their gases generated and using that to electricity to power their plant. As technology, and that was quite a while ago, as technology improves, we all know what's really amazing for a larger facility becomes more and more available to smaller facilities. But it's still quite a distance to get us there for such a small flow. Where you're seeing a ton of it right now is in farms. There's a lot of manure and anaerobic digestion going on with manure facilities because that waste particularly is a treasure trove of biogas, and there's a lot of improvements in anaerobic digesters right now when you talk about farm facilities.
There again, you know, we live in an agricultural community, and at the heart of Amenia's master plan is the word sustainability. And nothing represents sustainability as much as turning your waste stream into revenues and to capture, you know, lost energy cycles. And then, you know, there again, New York State is so interested in this type of system. There's, you know, millions of dollars available for funding.
I think we all just have to be careful. I think, you know, there's some wonderful electric vehicles are wonderful, but they're very expensive at this point for everyday citizens to use. And I think there's must be a difference in this conversation of technology that's very prudent economically at some level versus at a different level where it makes a lot of sense for municipal buses and to be running on methane or possibly electricity versus on a single family car. It's a different economy of scale. And I think that's the kind of discussion we're having. But I'd love to talk with you more about it. Do you want to finish up? And I'd be happy to.
What I'd like to do, I'm actually finished. I'd like to give other people a chance to ask some questions and then perhaps come back to you depending on how the group feels. Were there other questions or points that people wanted to make? Yes.
I was just wondering if you could go through again after the separation and we have these, what did you call them, the screens. Could you just describe that a little slower and a little more detailed? Because that's a new concept.
Are these textile sheets?
The textile sheets. Exactly what are they made of? Exactly how often are they changed? Just if you could go through that a little
Yes.
slower.
Let me just pull up that picture.
Yeah.
Because I love it.
And how long have they been around? Just a little history, something about it.
These are man-made sheets of plastic material, and so far they haven't needed to be replaced. The technology's been around probably about 30 years, Aaron, 20 to 30 years, and they're proving to be extremely robust. You can certainly easily, as you can see, pull it out and replace it with another sheet if you needed to do that. But it is a man-made material. Some of these other
So you
systems,
spray them with these organisms? Can you just describe the whole thing?
good. Let's go back a couple slides.
And then they eat up the bacteria? Is that what happens?
Actually, it's a little different. The bacteria is what's eating your wastewater. They're transforming the solid material into a removable component.
And
So they're digesting this, and also they're dying off and being settling out as bug bodies. But you've got these bacteria. That's what's transforming your wastewater. That's what's actually doing the treating. So these are good bacteria. We're used to thinking about bacteria in terms of pathogens. I mentioned some bacteria that cause disease at the beginning of the presentation. But these organisms are found in nature, and they're found in your septic system, and they are breaking down the wastewater, and that's what we mean by treating the wastewater. So in this case, these textile sheets are serving as the home. This is where the bacteria that are doing the wastewater treatment live. And where do they live? This is an electron or a microscopic version of that textile media. And if you look into that and you see all the spaces there, those are pores, those are air gaps. Air can move through that, wastewater can move through that, and there's plenty of room to cram in a whole bunch of bacteria, microorganisms that are doing the wastewater treatment. So the neat part about it is that you can get a higher concentration of organisms in a box. Whereas if you had a box of sand, it wouldn't have as much pore space, and you wouldn't have as large population of microorganisms in that exact same space.
Thank you.
Sure.
When you're using this kind of system, you were talking about a three-part, there's the separation by settlement,
proposal for Amenia does involve an independent phosphorus treatment technology, so that would be an add-on. This does reduce it somewhat, but not to the levels that you're looking at reducing it here.
And that partly depends on where you discharge.
Yes.
Yes.
If you can do total subsurface discharge like Hillsdale, you have less treatment.
Correct. Robin?
I was just wondering, on state level, is the state on board for all these optional types or different types of futuristic, in one sense of the word, systems to take over this? Canada, I don't think it's on board with a lot of stuff.
What a wonderful kid. That's just a wonderful question. And I really, unfortunately, know less about Connecticut regulations than, say, for example, Massachusetts or New York. But I think what I really like is what the regulator, John Sansalon, had said to me, is that when we look to approve these systems, we want it to make sense. We don't want to see things that are going to break, that we can't find parts for. It's got to make sense, and it's got to be easily maintained. And that's what their engineer is looking at when they're looking to approve these kinds of technologies. And Hillsdale was one of the first to do this in a municipal system in the state, but it's certainly gotten a whole lot of press and a lot of approval in different contexts, and Aaron's going to talk to you more about that at the next session. But that's what they're looking at is it doing what a wastewater treatment system should do? Can you maintain it? Is it reasonable? It doesn't make sense. It has to pass the reasonable test, which I just thought was a wonderful approach for the engineer to be taking, because they're open to it, but they don't want to buy a pig in a poke either.
Yes, I was wondering, Pipe Associates' original estimate was $5 million something, and then we acquired this property at 22 to Silo Ridge, and it dropped down to $4 million. Whether they re-engineer this, or how did we come up with this price, $1 million plus?
You certainly, over the past 15 years that I've been familiar with the system, you've looked at different size service areas and different treatment technologies and different treatment plant locations. But I'm assuming that it is exactly that. We've changed the configuration somewhat. But as far as the property specifics, I'm going to turn that over to you, Peter.
And I will turn it over.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question, so I'm a little at a loss.
It was a question.
Let's get the mic.
What parcels was that? Was it a question on what parcel is that right now?
No.
I was 1.45 million, and now the new report is 4.1 million.
Why is the price low? Okay, there are two different answers to that. We back up to the Silo Ridge plan that had been where they were going to build extra capacity in their original treatment plant for Amenia. The price tag of that for the collection system, because that was a collection system that took all the solids as well as the wastewater. That I know that's not what you're talking about, but I just want to. Jenny, you should talk on that. Can you hear me? All right. Anyway, your question is, what's the difference between the 5 million and the 4.4? Okay, that is the difference in where we're talking about doing the treatment plant, like the Hillsdale.
They re-engineer this? They engineer this again? Morris Associates?
Sorry.
Did they re-engineer it? Is that how they
In other words, how did you save $1 million here all of a sudden? Did they
Because if we looked at doing it on the town hall property, right, Aaron?
Oh, yeah.
That's what you can answer.
Okay, I can answer this question. I wasn't sure you've been through a lot of iterations here, so I don't want to say the wrong thing because I wasn't sure what iteration we were discussing. Clark did an analysis of parcels within focusing on the hamlet or within the entire town, what might be acceptable to treat wastewater on. Looking towards two methods that Candace discussed: surface discharge and groundwater discharge. So in other words, discharging into the ground versus discharging into a stream. When you discharge into a stream, especially some of the streams, for instance, right now on this parcel, I think you all might know there's a very small stream. My point goes back. It's probably this way. There's a very small stream that comes back there and then continues through the hamlet and pops out again, crosses under 22. That's a pretty small stream. So to treat wastewater up to the appropriate quality to discharge into that stream takes extra technology because the goal you're aiming for is much higher. The second parcel.
But where did they go from 5 million down to 4 million? I mean,
Well, I'm trying to explain that. To get into surface discharge, there's a lot of additional technology, stuff, equipment you need to do that. The second parcel that we identified, but at the point during the report, was not available, and I actually don't know, I'm not up to date on the status of that parcel, so presuming you're talking about the parcel that I'm aware of, it has enough space to do groundwater discharge. So to discharge subsurfacely instead of surface water discharge. Much less technology because you would anticipate, and the DEC's confirmed, you'd have lower permit limits, higher permit limits. So you don't need to treat to such a fine tertiary quality if you're discharging to the ground rather than discharging, and that saves a lot of dollars.
right. So then Morse Associates said this is going to be $1 million less, that way?
Sure.
Yes.
They did?
Yes, because
Do you have that?
not only for the treatment of the wastewater, but also for the ongoing operation and maintenance. Because when you have discharge into a surface stream, surface discharge, you have to do testing, and that has to be done, on a regular basis, and it's overseen by the DEC, and that costs money. You have to have somebody do it, you have to have a lab read it, it has to be sent out, and all of that. If you can do subsurface discharge, it actually really does save $1 million. So that's where that came from. Ed, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I just want to say
Session
that the park engineering would have done reports on this.
I was just going to let it go. I'm Erin Moore from Clark Engineering, just to clarify.
One of the questions you asked was where you could see that in writing, and as I understand, the most recent preliminary engineering report that Clark Engineering has done is posted on the Amenia website, so I encourage you to read that, and you'll probably generate a lot more questions too from looking at that.
Janet, the roughly $1,000, is that before the $1 million shortfall? And if it is, what plans do you have to come up with that shortfall money? That's my first question. And then the second question is it just the people in the district who are bearing this cost? And if so, is there any substantiation? If the intent of this is to, that the town, the core of the town, will benefit, of course, by having a septic system and offering services, expanding the town and so forth, is there any argument for the town, all the townspeople bearing the cost of this, and not just 130 people?
Actually, that is a very good question that came up. I know Mike Malango has been talking about that, looking into when Bridget Barkley did her presentation about the steps that Amenia has to take. The question was brought, is there any way to spread the cost to the whole town since the whole town would benefit? And I think, Mike, perhaps you can speak to that better than I, but I know that the town is looking into that. But I don't know what the resolution will be. Generally speaking, in a sewer district or a water district or anything else, the people who are the immediate beneficiaries in order to get the $3 million no-cost grant loan from EFC. And we need to find a way of coming up with the other $1.4 million. And the wastewater committee, the town board, I think everybody in Amenia is working very hard to try to figure out how that's possible. But at this point, I can't give you any straight answer because there isn't any at this, how to do this.
One
But Mike,
suggestion-
maybe you wanted to say something.
I was just thinking that it's possible that there is, I know that there's some straight formula, but of course the people who are in the district have a benefit that may be to some degree a larger proportional benefit than the people who live outside of the district.
Well,
So there could be some.
the way that the law is written, when you form a district, basically the residents that bore the costs are the ones that benefit. Now, I'm arguing that if we form a district for the downtown and eventually, larger, it's going to make the town better. It's going to bring in more revenue. It's going to lower taxes. It's going to be better for the town. All right? So my argument is the whole town benefits. All right? Brings in more money for the schools and everything. So why can't we spread the cost of this project along to 1,100 properties instead of 120? We're looking to find, the law is there, but we can't find anybody that has done it yet. So we're looking, I've been working with the Association of Towns. We're going through other municipalities and other sewer districts and everything else to try to find that case study to say, hey, let's try it this way. So we're working. The 1.4 million, we're working on ways to get that too. Basically, we're brainstorming. We're getting, I'd rather have 100 recommendations and find out that 99 of them are no good. But that one is going to work. If we didn't have all 100, we would have never got that one. So no idea is a bad idea. And in my book, any situation or any way we could solve this is definitely worth exploring. So that's why we have to get involved. The community has to get involved. We have to come to these meetings and we have to sit down and talk. We have to figure out everybody's concerns. Everybody has to get information that they need to make a judgment call. Again, Mrs. Regan said we're up against it, all right? The way that it's working, it's kind of a catch-22. We can't go for more grant money if we don't have a district form, all right? If we have a district form, there might be more grants out there that are going to lower this cost. So when they're putting that $1,000 per benefit user, it's a high estimate. Could it come in at 600? Of course it can. Could it come at 800? Of course it can. We don't. The way that the math is figured out, we were talking about this the other day, it's like 220% high. And again, can it come in at 1,500? I guess it's possible. Anything is possible. Can it come in at 500? Of course it can. But once we get this district form, there's going to be more grants available, more money could possibly come in and lower the cost.
Once you get the district form, you lock in the amount of people who are in the district when the prices are set. Right now, you're talking about around $1,000 to pay off the $3 million loan. Plus, on top of that, you have to pay for the $1.4 million loan. Plus, on top of that, you have to pay for
$1.4 million loan. The $1.4 million cannot be paid back. It has to be either a gift, money raised. The $1.4 million is not getting paid back. Only the $3 million is at 0%.
That's still $1,000 plus your usage, which hasn't been discussed. The monthly cost is high. And there's nothing wrong with saying it. I just wish somebody would say it. It's an incredibly high cost compared to the monthly cost that you pay now. considering that you still got your septic on your property.
Yeah, and that's what was talked about. What happens in 10 or 15 years when the septic is not good? And then you have to redo your septic and there's no room to redo your septic. What happens then?
Could be, I don't think everybody could hear what you said, Brendan, and I certainly didn't. I think perhaps it would be good if we pass the microphone around to the people who are asking the question. And I think somebody who
Let them come up.
What?
Let them come up.
Or come up and say what you have to say. Okay.
I don't need the mic.
All right.
The problem, the question that you're asking me, one of the things that makes it so difficult, Amenia is the most unique geography of almost any town. You've got a huge mountain, you have 6 separate hamlets in different places, and most of the people out there are struggling with their own septic systems and paying huge amounts to maintain it and to keep their own water systems and their wells working. So when you carry all that extra money that they're putting in, you have a hard time convincing them that they should pay for the other folks too. And that is part of what you're up against. And that's what poor Mike is up against while he's trying to sort out what's the most creative way to do that.
Janet, I just want to make a kind of a comment and a question, because I see both sides of it. The folks who are outside the town, you know, like I'm kind of like on the outside, you know where I am. I'm down on 22. I'm next to the old Amenia Motors. I have never had a problem with my septic. I was just curious to know, who are we talking about? Whose septics are failing in this town? What are we dealing with? Do we really know exactly what we're dealing with? I'm really confused.
I keep hearing that Broadway is a big problem. Nobody on Broadway has it.
And this system that we're putting in, is it dealing with who the problems are?
But the last meeting, you said there were people on Depot Hill that were having issues with their systems. Why not address that area instead of an area that really nobody has problems? Does it make any sense? It's
But they're excluded.
Darlene, perhaps you can speak to this, because when the original district was thought about, well, there were some failures.
Yes, and I think the obvious failures are, of course, the day nursery, and that has since been remediated. The cozy, there were 5 failures downtown, and you know the highest point is right at the light, and every failure is going down to the stream, which would be going into a pond behind the Catholic Church in that area. But there are failures on Depot Hill, but there's a lot of rock on Depot Hill. So when you investigate putting a district there, it's very expensive. Our district originally included Depot Hill, Railroad Avenue, Lake Amenia, very large. In that district, you have very expensive areas to deal with, and rock is one of them. And Depot Hill has a lot of rock. So we have to start somewhere, and there was a mix that was affordable. This is the most affordable. If we included these other areas, it would be over the top. But once you start and you have something, in fact, over the years the technology has gotten better, so I think we're in a better position than we were back then. It was going to cost $11 million just for the collection system to go up to Silo Ridge. So now we're down to 4.4. So it's in the realm of possibilities.
They were going to have a sewer system at Silo Ridge originally, right? That wasn't just with the wastewater.
We were going to pump uphill. That last pump station was going to cost us $600,000 alone.
I know.
We had to have a redundant pump station.
Can I just comment on just the question of failures too? I just want to first point not talk at all specifically about that, but there is something, just in general, we have to think about that Candace touched upon, and that's failures you can see and failures you can't see. If you flush the toilet and it flush, your system isn't failing, is the common sense. If you're in the backyard and you can walk across your backyard and not walk into that mucky area that you have to avoid, your system's not failing. But I think everyone here knows the geography here and groundwater. There are very short distances to groundwater. There's a lot of water body that's filled in. So when we talk about what failure means, it also means the issues Candace discussed. Are we causing excessive phosphorus and nitrogen to enter into the water bodies in the community? And I think we have to think about that. And one of the ways that you identify that is just looking at a parcel. How much area for a single family home do you need to successfully treat wastewater for a business? The Cozy Corner on the edge, they did a really innovative thing there, but think about that. If everyone knows that place, they use the entire open space of their parcel behind that restaurant and build up in a very creative manner to be able to successfully treat their wastewater on that parcel size. And it just stands to reason you need a certain amount of area to successfully treat wastewater. If you have your building is covering 90% of your parcel, you're not successfully treating your wastewater, even if in the springtime you're not walking through a funnel.
I'm not arguing over, I think you got a good system. I'm arguing over the cost. There's a lot of people retired down here on Broadway and Morton Place. We've already got 4 houses in foreclosure, bank foreclosure. So what do you want, the rest of them in foreclosure down?
Yeah, and that's I just want to explain what failure means. Finances are a totally different issue. I just want to explain failure, what it means for people to be failing, because that was the conversation that first.
And the point that the wastewater committee has been saying from the very beginning when we started talking about this is that we don't think that this is low enough at this point. But nobody has said that this is what we think will be the right number. And we are committed to trying to find ways of reducing the cost further. But I think what Mike said is indeed the catch-22 that we are all facing. You cannot apply for grants until you have a sewer district. You can't get a sewer district until you get the cost down. So there you are. You're in this quandary. And then the other point that I want to make is that it is Hillsdale was under an order of consent. I don't know if you all know what that means, but that means like have been under for the old Amenia landfill. That means you have to clean it up. It doesn't matter how much it costs. You got to clean it up or else. And that is something that could happen to Amenia.
That's something,
And
at the
that is
last
something-
meeting, the woman said that the odds of that happening to Amenia were slim to none, Janet.
I can't hear you.
At the last meeting, the woman said that was slim to none for that happening in Amenia.
She agreed that that was not realistic, at least right now. But what about 10, 15 years down the road? Who knows? So I'm just putting that out there. I think that there's several people that have a question. Tony first and then...
I just want to take off my newspaper hat and just say a couple of comments as the watershed protection person for the Houstonic Valley Association for this area, which is that basically our whole area was built on the wetlands all the way up from Holland. And there are places where the houses really should not have gone. There are places, even on Broadway, where it used to be like Amenia, where probably it shouldn't have gone. We've had 2 200-year floods in the last 2007, 2009. They were really bad, especially in Wassail. We assessed all 4 rivers in our river network going into the Houstonic, as most people know, our rivers go into the Houstonic River, not the Hudson River. And we saw exposed septic tanks down on on the 10 Mile River where the banks had washed away from the last flood. Those people had to walk away from their properties. They did not get reimbursed. They had to walk away from their properties. We have had done water quality testing on four of the 5 streams in the area, including Sharon. And yes, there is a very high nutrient and phosphorus and sodium and chloride going into our waterways. At the rate of salination, our water will be undrinkable in 40 years, according to Stuart Findlay. This nutrient loading is a really serious problem. It's killing a lot of things all the way down on the Long Island Sound. So we're going to be petitioning for that. You know, you could be responsible to have to clean that up statewide for these towns. So in actual fact, when I mentioned this to some of the people in Connecticut, because our main office is in Connecticut, they said, oh my God, that's so cheap. We know people who paid $18,000 to hook up into a sewer system near Fairfield, Connecticut. So it can be a lot more expensive. This is a pretty good deal as far as septic alternatives go, in terms of what I've heard about in the region. So it's we have a problem here. We're in a wetlands. It does cost money to deal with it. We've been flooding and having a lot of problems, and we can expect a lot more intense storm events. That's from my point of view as a watershed protection person, and I just wanted to share it.
Candace wants to say something.
Before we take another question, there's a question that you two had in the back that I wanted to address. And one was about that $1,000 number and whether that assumed that you were going to get the $1.4 million that you're missing. And the other question was, did that include the operation and maintenance costs, which are both really important questions. So to answer the first question, yes, that $1,000 assumes that you filled that grant gap, that $1.4 million gap. But it also assumes that that's your projected service charge, which includes your operation and maintenance costs. So I just wanted to clear that up. But the one other thing I wanted to point out is a very wonderful question about how about the whole town. And I know you've been looking in towns. There certainly are municipalities, and it's very rare that there are municipalities in New York where the whole town does chip in. In some villages, the whole village chips in. How did that come about? Well, the people in the community value that so much. They value the development of their downtown so much that they were willing to chip in towards the treatment system, and they voted in favor of it. Because that's where it always comes down to where the rubber hits the road is you have a proposal. And that proposal, when you form a district, you have to say, what's the total cost? What's the total cost per user? And the people have to vote in a majority for that district to be formed. If they force a referendum, it goes to referendum. If it's voted down, it's voted down. And that happens all the time. But in these communities where the whole town pays, they were actually able to pass a referendum because the community residents were so committed to supporting the growth of their downtown area that even though they were on septic systems, they chipped in. And you made a wonderful point about how, well, they don't pay the same amount as the people that are on the system. Of course not. The bulk of it was, and it's so interesting because I can't think of the name of the community, but I was on the phone. Was it you?
Was it suburban?
No, it was another.
Was it a suburban or was it rural?
A rural community, yeah. There are examples in New York State, and I know you said you've been looking for them, and we really will get you that information because that's a key point. And it's very, very hard to get the people who aren't on the system to want to pay for it. But like I said, in these unusual instances, the communities were so committed that it passed a vote in referendum. But it actually, the one that I was just hearing about, it brought in, even though the amount that the outsiders were paying was so little, it actually made a significant impact on the user costs for the people within the district. So it's a great question.
This gentleman is next.
Candace was mentioning how much the small diameter pipe is easier to use, valves in the ground and through rock, etc. When the original district was proposed, it did include depot hill, and then looked at the cost of going valves. That was on the older technology. Is there any way?
You know, they looked at both. Actually, when Morris first looked at that, they compared gravity collection system to the cost of the small diameter, and since the small diameter is cheaper, that's why that's been the push throughout. But they actually compared them both.
Right, so I'm saying, so to put, there's a possibility, you could put that area back in with this new technology, as opposed to what you strictly set up, looking at the old technology.
You know what happened in one of these iterations? Aaron pointed out that you've looked at different configurations. You've looked at 300 properties. You've looked at 900 properties. You're looking at 150 properties now. It's changed to try to bring that cost down. And in one particular iteration that I think the wastewater authority was instrumental in, they took little blocks of this street and this street and this street. They said for the number of people on it and the cost it's going to take to serve it, what's the cost per household? If it was really high, they cut it down, because that was the way to bring the cost down. So as was mentioned, that Depot Hill, Darlene mentioned that Depot Hill area, there's another element to that too. Not only was that more costly to serve, when I first became involved with this project, Darlene and the wastewater committee was deeply involved in doing an interest survey. And there were two questions on that survey. Do you think you need wastewater treatment? And this is 97 or 98. Do you think you need wastewater treatment? And would you pay between $400 and $600 for it? And Darlene took all those answers and all the yeses and no's and mapped them, because we actually have the property code is key to that survey. So that the original 300 parcels that was looked at initially was maximizing those yeses. That was drawn to really build community support. It's very difficult to get 90 or 100% because it was really strong, with 75% yeses in that region. So it's always been a goal of this committee to not force on people that don't want it, but to keep the cost down as best as possible. And sometimes it's trade-off.
But isn't that what's happening? Are we being forced, if we live within that district, are we being forced, what you just said, we try not to have people forced to participate, but we're going to be forced.
And you will speak to at all to the methodology of how we Jonathan compress the district?
Not really. I think that we're talking more in the generic sense about subsurface treatment.
Yeah, I think this is really, we're getting into the realm of the next presentation more than this one. But I think that the wastewater committee meetings are open. We have been wrestling with this for 20 years at least. It's not something that just sprang out of somebody's head, last week. And the idea was to try to get the cost down and get a system that could be expanded. That is the other key. One of the things about this type of system, and we wouldn't necessarily have to go with Advantex, we wouldn't necessarily replicate the Hillsdale system, but this kind of technology is something that is reproducible in other parts of town or can be added to. The people at Depot Hill wanted to join, that would be a possibility. It isn't like any one district, it's just that and set in stone for the rest.
What about Wasaic, if you're just now talking about that?
Wasaic, definitely, it wouldn't be something that could tie into this particular facility because the piping would be prohibitively expensive because of the distance, I think. But it does not preclude a similar system for the hamlet of Wasaic. It doesn't preclude a similar system for areas farther to the south, closer to Dover. I mean, all of one of the advantages of this type of system is that it uses less of a footprint.
town. The infrastructure is pretty easy to plan, you know, just because it's not very complicated. And we also have the benefit of having Silo Ridge, again, who has, you know, 250 units, or whatever you want to call them, going in up there. Silo Ridge has an invested interest in downtown Amenia as well, just because if they're trying to sell units up there for $1 million or $1.5 million each, they're going to want downtown Amenia to be as vibrant and as nice as possible. So I think that resource, you know, really needs to be tapped as well.
We have been talking, the town has been talking to Silo Ridge, obviously. I mean, and actually, any other developer, I mean, there were two possible developments on Depot Hill that are, you know, not before the planning board anymore.
Yeah.
But should that area be developed, then obviously those developers would be interested in this sort of thing.
Yeah, it would be unthinkable to have Silo Ridge build a wastewater treatment plant and then the town to also build a wastewater treatment plant a mile, 3/4 of a mile away from it. I mean, it just seems like a ridiculous notion.
Well, actually, it's not that close. I mean,
you couldn't really ask for...
The original proposal was the plant was halfway up Delaware Hill, and it would have required a pumping station that cost $600,000.
The county parcel where the salt trucks, the salt sheds, and the sheriff's department is, actually was one of the sites that was considered for our plan. And that is about exactly halfway between the hamlet and between Silo Ridge. And the county has the benefit of owning it. You know, maybe the sheriff's department could be moved into the town hall here, and you know, a plant be created there. If we went with like a biogas plant or a cogeneration plant, the energy would be easily fed into the infrastructure. There's some high power or high voltage lines that come right behind that site as well. But yeah, again, just to be going about this without also, you know, communicating with Silo Ridge, which, like you said, of course you have been. You know, we just got to make sure we're doing that as much as possible, because this is really, really expensive, you know, per household. And I think it would be a great idea to extend, you know, the cost to the whole community, just because everybody would benefit from having a vibrant downtown Amenia that could maybe support a movie house or could, you know, support some more growth of businesses. So why not spread it out, you know, amongst all of them?
Estimate how much it would cost if it was amortized over the whole town, like per person, per household? We have 4,400.
We have 4,400 people, but residents, I mean, properties is, what, about 1,200? 1,100?
So if you divide 1,200 into 1 point, what is it?
You wouldn't equally charge them. You couldn't charge non-beneficiary the same
But
amount.
yeah, like guesstimate, what would the other people pay?
It's $100 a year.
$100 a year? So if all the other people paid $100 a year, your prices would go down.
Well, if you're going to bring in 1,200 people instead of 128,
Yeah, so that would be the help.
It brings it down
People on
to
Broadway
$1,000.
who are suffering.
But you have to be able to service 1,200 people. I mean, I think the big question there is a legal question that the town has to...
Well, that's what we're looking into,
Yeah,
because from the way that it was,
the question is legally, could you do it? No,
we
it
don't
has
know if
been
we
done.
have to offer them service.
I mean, those people are going to ask you to pay for their sewers too, because they can't do both necessarily.
I mean, the argument could be made that you're improving the whole town's groundwater, and actually 80% of people are dependent on quality groundwater. So that's one issue.
If somebody's having trouble with their septic system and then you put in this treatment plant for the other part of people in another part of the town, if they're having trouble with their system, I can't imagine they're going to be willing to pitch in
help pay for the other part where people are going to be part of this treatment plant.
See, most towns have a center, and then there's a few people in the outskirts. It's like the spokes of a wheel.
Right.
And that model works better, adding a little here, you know.
Right.
You've got a donut, you know, with a mountain down the middle, and you've got all these hamlets clustered. And all those people in all those other hamlets are struggling with their own systems. And so you can't make it fit the same model.
But you're talking about expanding, but then you're saying, well, we can't do it if you go up because there's too much rock. So if you're going to expand, where are you going to expand?
Well, they didn't say they couldn't do it. They said it was cost effective to do
Right.
it.
So we're going to pay to get it started, and then they're going to...
And basically what's going to happen is, I mean, I don't know if it's true or not. My theory is we get the district formed, we get the downtown done. We get the downtown prosperous, we start raising tax revenue and everything else. Now that's going to bring more people into the areas, it's going to be more homes, more people looking to be on the system. Now we expand our system because we have more people actually using it. The more people on it brings the cost down. When we have the sewer, if we have a sewer system, now you don't need an acre to house a new building because you don't have, like they were stating, the Cozy Corner used 95% of the property just for their sewer system. Now you're going to have parcels that you don't need that 95% of the property anymore because you just hook into a pipe. Now you're going to help with parking. You're going to help with more buildings on parcels that you know, I mean, we got to start somewhere. This is... Go ahead.
I'm sorry. So if you're going to start somewhere, so the center of town is where the issues are. Then you're going to branch out to Martin Place and Broadway where the issues are not. You're going to take that group of people, bring them in to help fix the problem in the town when their problems aren't curled, to help pay for, to get started in town.
I understand what you're saying. Why Broadway was chosen as part of the district now. I wasn't involved with it then. I don't know.
But you know, in Wasaya, I had to pay $8,000 to put in a new system because I had no old-fashioned cesspool. So if you amortize that over 20 years, you're paying a pretty penny too if you have to replace your system because of the flooding that's going to happen.
I paid $3,000 to replace mine 3 years ago.
How much?
$3,000.
Well, you have a smaller house than I do.
It's okay, but I'm on Broadway. I want to be hooked into.
Right, not where you decide to live.
I think it's getting late and we're... Candace, you're going to wrap it up because I think we're...
Yeah, these are really great, important, and not easily resolved issues. We're wrestling with this for a reason. But we are looking to do a second presentation that addresses the specifics in more detail. We'll have the Dutchess County Water and Wastewater Authority talking to you more about funding. We'll have the engineer talking to you more about that, and also the committee giving you a little bit of background because you may not realize the iterations, that years and years of conversations with Silo Ridge. The fact that the county parcel was the first parcel that was looked at and ruled out because of the size was inadequate in the county we wanted there. There's a whole host of history here that you might not realize. This wastewater committee has been incredibly involved and incredibly diligent over the past 15 years. So hopefully we'll get a chance to get into more of these details and have it start fresh and have more time to talk about these issues and questions. And I'm not saying it's easily resolvable, but it's good that everybody's trying out.
Just one quick question. What deadline are we up against to this loan?
The $3 million is contingent upon our getting the 1.4 additional money without borrowing it. And it's a 2-year, it's August of 2015, we would have to have a whole bunch of steps done.
It doesn't mean it's not going to happen. You have an offer on the table that's good until 2015. If you don't
to get this stress loan?
More or less. I mean, there was, we'll go into all of that in more detail in the next